Verbs have voice, mood, tense, number, and person. Voice, there are two voices, active and passive. The active represents the subject as acting or being. Legatum laudo, I praise the envoy. VLLO, I am well. The passive represents the subject as acted upon. Laudor, I am praised. Mood, there are three moods, indicative, subjunctive, imperative.
Which one of those moods is annoyed?
Present, imperfect, future perfect, pluperfect, and future perfect.
Hey buddy, no one's that
Singular and
perfect.
plural. Person, there are three persons. First, second, and third.
Doesn't matter how many persons there are, we're all
The
bored.
one spoken to, you. Third, the one spoken of, he, she, it, they. But enough of that. Why don't we go back to another exercise? Let's translate.
Oh please, no.
Curricula in Silvis Galliae. Non et pas in Gallia quod Caesar cum milibutus.
Who else thinks this sounds like
Gallia
French and
est.
gibberish? Well, at least the drawing turned out good.
Populus ducem
Yeah,
militum
Latin.
propter virutum loda. Jeez, Latin.
Alright, so you've ever had one of those days where you were supposed to be taking notes, but you ended up doodling something instead, and it actually ended up turning out really good? Well, if you're an artist, have you ever found yourself doodling something in a notebook or on some test or book or notes, something you're not supposed to be technically drawing on, and you try to recreate that same drawing in a sketchbook because what you doodled turned out so well that you want it to be in a nice book with good paper, well preserved, something that you can show to other people and say, here's what I drew in my sketchbook that started off in a notebook. But then as you're trying to recreate this piece, it just it doesn't turn out the same. It's stiff, it's weird, and you get frustrated, and all you want to do is just throw your sketchbook away, straight into the abyss where it's the Lily factor. Ding! Oh, no. Hopefully your sketchbook's not with me. But it's always just kind of this frustrating parallel between drawing in a notebook versus a sketchbook. It's like, which do you choose? Do you have to choose? And is there really something that makes one better than the other? Or is it all just kind of in our heads? I think it's possible that it might be all of the above and none of the above. It's almost kind of a matter of opinion. For drawing in a notebook, I think it's almost this pressure kind of just floats away. Whereas if you're drawing in a sketchbook, there's an expectation that what you're drawing in said sketchbook has to be good. It's what it's for. A sketchbook is for drawing, but it's like this collection of drawings put in this special book for people to judge for eternity. Whereas if you're just drawing in a notebook, it doesn't seem to matter. And it's almost like having the lines there in the notebook takes away this pressure to actually draw something well, because it's almost like the paper is already ruined in that sense that you can just draw whatever you want, and these lines take away the pressure for it. So it's almost kind of a psychological thing drawing in a notebook, where in your mind there's no pressure. Is it almost why sometimes it seems like drawing in a notebook, the drawings turn out better than drawing in a sketchbook, even though technically a notebook shouldn't be setting you up for success drawing. Because not only does a notebook take away from the actual drawing, having all those lines built in there, but also notebook paper is thinner, it's weaker, and I would like to say that it probably ages a little faster, because I have some notebooks I had drawn in growing up that are browning much faster than the sketchbooks I drew in, so and it's easier for the paper to get bent and such, whereas sketchbook paper is a little sturdier and it's kind of built for drawing, so it should be able to better preserve the drawings in and of itself. So in that sense, notebook paper isn't exactly doing your art a favor, but it's freeing to draw in a notebook. But shouldn't it be freeing to draw in a sketchbook? I mean, isn't that what it's for? there's no lines on the sketchbook, so it would be easier to just start drawing something, right? You've got a blank slate to just kick into something. So why is it that drawing in a sketchbook, you could draw the same thing and it doesn't turn out as it did in a notebook, and it's stiffer, or it's not as appealing, or it's not as unique, it just doesn't have the same motion as the other drawing, whatever it may be? Well, why is it that way? Or is it really that way? Or is it just that's how we feel? Because it is subjective. I mean, art can be subjective. So is it just that first impressions of the notebook drawing just felt better drawing it than trying to recreate the same thing again? But you know what? Pushing the notebook aside, let's not even think about notebook drawing for a second. Just think about sketchbook drawing. Why is it hard to draw on a sketchbook? Why is it hard to actually fill or finish a sketchbook? Whether you're a dedicated artist or you're just somebody who maybe draws every now and then and has found yourself being one of those people that has gotten sketchbooks as random impromptu gifts from other people that you're like, oh, I have a sketchbook now, maybe I should fill it. And you start to draw in there and you just can't commit to it. What is it about that? Why is it hard to draw in a sketchbook? It's called a sketchbook, right? It's for sketching in a book. What are we doing to ourselves that it's hard to fill a sketchbook? I mean, regardless of how you get a sketchbook, whether it's been given to you or you decided to become an artist and you got a sketchbook, you felt the need to get a sketchbook and you get one, and then it's hard. You like draw on one page and that's the end of that. You did maybe like a drawing of an eye or portrait and you close the sketchbook and put it away. Why is it hard to actually draw in a sketchbook? I think it's a myriad of things, and I think it depends on the person, but I think there's something to be said about what's going on in your head and your expectations you set up before you sit down to draw in a sketchbook. I think because it's the very fact that it's in a book, there's this sense of pressure that, okay, it means it's going to be a little more preserved. It means there's going to be all this art kept together in one place. And so there should be a sort of theme or cohesiveness, something to make it all well put together and interesting. And yet, is that really the kind of pressure you want on yourself if you just want to draw? Does a sketchbook really have to be something impressive? Does it have to be that way? Could we just draw lines on our sketchbook or scribbles and treat it like it's a notebook and have a better time drawing in a sketchbook and maybe do a better job filling a sketchbook? And maybe it's not even about telling yourself you have to finish a sketchbook, but rather telling yourself you get to draw in a sketchbook. Now, whether you've given yourself difficult expectations for filling a sketchbook or what's around you has established your expectations about how to fill a sketchbook, I mean, goodness knows that with social media, there's this expectation of having a sketchbook filled to show off on social media. And I'm not saying that as a critique against anybody, but there's that standard set up about sketchbooks being something to show off. And then there's also, I know there's like art schools that have scholarship opportunities involving filling up sketchbooks and making them filled quickly and filled with impressive art. So whether it's just something you've told yourself without any influence that a sketchbook should be filled with impressive art, or you've been seeing nothing but the examples of filling a sketchbook has to have impressive art, it just puts this this barrier between the artist and the sketchbook where it's hard to want to fill it, it's hard to want to draw in it. But I think too, the word sketch is in and of itself, it's not a perfect form of art. Sketches are really rough drawings. They're not perfect. They have a lot of lines everywhere. They're not refined. They're just there to kind of get the idea started, to get the ball rolling. So in that sense, a sketchbook is not an art book. I can understand why it's easier to draw in a notebook than a sketchbook. It's just freeing to not have this pressure. But if you don't want your art to be bound behind the bars of notebook lines, then you've got to reset your thinking in terms of what a sketchbook is to you. As for myself, I found myself having sketchbooks that were hard to fill and having sketchbooks that were so much fun to fill, I was really sad to bid the sketchbooks adieu. And so I'm going to kind of give some examples here. But for this sketchbook, this was actually one of those sketchbooks that was really hard to say goodbye to. I have since kind of completely filled it, but I mean, there's some things I could probably still do in it, but mostly it's been filled. And this is one of my sketchbooks I call my free sketchbook. As you can see from what I'm drawing here, I am actually just doodling. I'm just scribbling characters and faces and drawing whatever I want. This sketchbook has been filled with art that's both fan art or doodles, sometimes concept art and character designs. It's a completely free sketchbook. It's got studies, it's got everything. And it's a fun sketchbook to have because I feel like I can just open it up and start drawing and not feel any pressure and not care. It's just as freeing as doodling in a notebook during a really boring Latin lesson. So that's my free sketchbook. For you, you need to get yourself a free sketchbook. If you want your art to be better preserved, or if you have some sketchbooks just sitting on a shelf collecting dust that need to be filled, grab a sketchbook and tell yourself, this is my free sketchbook where I get to be free as an artist. No one even has to see what's in this sketchbook. This can be your own personal freedom sketchbook. I've had sketchbooks where I literally took notes for geometry or whatever in there, and so treating it also like a notebook, but it was a sketchbook, and that allowed me to doodle. I've had sketchbook spreads that are really nicely done and painted, but in the same sketchbook having things like this where it's scribbles to get out frustrations or anxieties, and then some sketchbook spreads where you can barely fill anything in there. It's just one of those days. And I've literally had a sketchbook with pages of just scribbles. Sketchbooks should be treated like free spaces as much as doodling in a notebook can be. So get yourself a freedom sketchbook. And then if you still feel like you need a sketchbook with good art to show to people, then that's another sketchbook. That's a separate sketchbook. And I've got me some of those as well. I even have separate sketchbooks for different projects I work on, for television shows I plan to create someday. And I had one that I just struggled to fill. It was kind of frustrating, and I don't know if it was a hardcover sketchbook, so maybe the cover didn't feel right or the size didn't feel right. Regardless, I got a new sketchbook that I was like, I'm going to use this sketchbook to motivate me to fill this sketchbook so I can start doing concept art for this show in this sketchbook. But I could never get myself to finish it as much as I wanted to draw in the other sketchbook. So you know what I did? I abandoned that sketchbook and started working in the new sketchbook, which motivated me to actually do more art for that show. And it actually caused me to go back to the old sketchbook I abandoned and start filling in the pages. Because that's the other thing too. There will come a time where you may find yourself going back to a sketchbook you left behind. It's never too late. The sketchbook will not have resentment towards you and say, too late, I'll never forgive you. Sketchbooks are very forgiving. Okay, you can run back to that sketchbook and the sketchbook will open up and welcome you with open pages. Open arms or pages, whatever you want to use that analogy with. But yes, so notebook versus sketchbook, I would say whatever inclines you to draw, then draw in there, even if it's a notebook. But also, if you want to do a better job of preserving your art. Or if maybe you feel a little guilty drawing in a notebook, then find yourself a sketchbook that feels just like drawing in a notebook, but maybe even better because it's better paper. You can use different mediums, whatever it may be. And another thing too, when in doubt, just turn the sketchbook upside down and draw something that's, not very good, that you don't really like this. And it helps for you, because then suddenly the page that you're drawing in doesn't feel so serious, and you can just draw whatever you want on there. Let the sketchbook be as free as the notebook, but without the lines holding you back this time. I hope this let me get off my soapbox. But yeah, I hope this was helpful. And I hope you did a tally of how many times I said sketchbook, because I want to know how many times I said it, but I'm too lazy to count myself. So with all that being said, I'd like to thank you all for watching, and may God bless you in your life and your arts, and whatever you may be drawing in these days. Bye!